The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than any building on Earth. Its walls stretched up so high that clouds formed near the ceiling. Thousands of seats filled the space, each one made for a different type of alien body. Some seats held creatures made of living crystal. Others were filled with gas tanks where cloud-like beings floated inside. The strangest seats looked like giant ant hills, where millions of tiny bugs worked together as one mind. At the center of it all stood a small wooden podium. It looked simple and plain next to all the fancy alien technology around it. Behind this podium stood Hyun-Woo Kim, the human ambassador to the Galactic Council. Hyun-Woo was 45 years old, with gray hair starting to show at his temples. He wore a simple black suit, the kind any human businessman might wear. Next to the glowing robes and floating metal bodies of the aliens around him, he looked very ordinary. But his dark eyes were sharp and alert as he watched the council members talk about his people. For 30 years, humans had worked for the Galactic Council. They fixed problems that other species could not solve. When wars broke out between alien races, human diplomats found ways to make peace. When deadly diseases spread across planets, human doctors found cures. When dead worlds needed to be made alive again, human engineers built machines to clean the air and water. The humans were good at these jobs, very good. Some people said they were the best problem solvers in the galaxy, but there was one problem the humans could never solve. The aliens would not let them join the council as real members. Today was supposed to change that. After 3 decades of service, the humans had asked to become full members of the Galactic Council. They wanted to vote on important decisions. They wanted to help make the laws that affected everyone in the galaxy, including Earth Kendros. The representative from the Velthari Empire stood up to give the council's answer. The Velthari looked like tall, thin humans, but their skin was blue, and they had 4 arms instead of 2. Kendros was over 7 feet tall and wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. The Galactic Council has made its decision about the human request, Kendros said. His voice was cold and formal. After much discussion, we have decided that humanity will not be granted membership in this council. Hyun-Woo did not move. His face showed no emotion. Behind him, other human workers stopped what they were doing and listened. Furthermore, Kendros continued, we have decided that this request will not be considered again. Humanity lacks the sophistication needed for true galactic citizenship. Your species will continue to serve the council in your current role. The words hit the room like a physical blow. In the human section, Ji-Hoon Park looked up from his computer terminal. He was the head of the human translation team, the group that made it possible for all these different species to understand each other. His hands stopped moving on the keyboard. So-Young Lee, who managed the human data networks that kept track of everything happening in the galaxy, slowly pushed her chair back from her workstation. Her face was pale. The vote was unanimous, Kendros added, as if he wanted to make sure the humans understood how completely they had been rejected. One by one, the other council members spoke up to agree. Kexalar, the crystalline being who spoke for the Nexari, made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. This meant yes in the Nexari language. The gas cloud that was the Fentok representative flashed bright blue, which was their way of agreeing. The Zulkar Collective, made up of millions of insect-like creatures, buzzed in harmony. Every major species in the galaxy had voted against the humans. We expect human teams to report to the Kepler 442b system immediately, Kexalar said, its crystal body glowing brighter. The terraforming project there is behind schedule. The Velthari colonists are waiting. This was how it always worked. The aliens would give the humans orders, and the humans would follow them. No discussion, no vote. The humans were treated like very smart servants. Hyun-Woo finally moved. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It was a recording pad that held his prepared speech. He had written it hoping that today would be different. That today humanity would finally be welcomed as equals. He looked at the device for a moment, then put it back in his pocket without reading from it. Instead, he began to gather the papers from his podium. His movements were slow and careful. Each paper was folded neatly and placed in his briefcase. He worked in complete silence while thousands of alien beings watched him. "Ambassador Kim," Kendros said, and there was annoyance in his voice now. "Did you not hear the Council's instructions? Your teams need to leave for Kepler 442b immediately." Hyunwoo closed his briefcase with a soft click. The sound seemed very loud in the huge hall. He looked up at the Velthari representative. "I heard you," he said quietly. Behind him, Jihoon was shutting down his translation equipment. The screens that showed words in hundreds of alien languages went dark one by one. So Young was packing up her data terminals, carefully removing the storage devices that held decades of galactic information. Other human workers throughout the hall were doing the same thing. They moved with purpose, but without panic. Like Hyunwoo, they showed no anger on their faces. They just quietly began to pack up their things. "What are you doing?" demanded Velquin, the Fentok representative. The gas cloud started flashing. Red, which meant confusion or alarm in their species. Hyunwoo picked up his briefcase and walked out from behind the podium. For the first time in 30 years, a human was leaving the center of the council chamber without permission. "We resign. From all council obligations," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "Effective immediately." The hall erupted in noise. Aliens made sounds of shock and confusion in dozens of different languages. Some whistled, others buzzed. A few made sounds like breaking glass. Without the human translation systems, most of them could not understand what the others were saying. Hyunwoo walked toward the exit. His team followed him. Jihoon carried a box full of translation equipment. So-young pushed a cart loaded with data storage units. Other humans throughout the hall left their posts and joined the group walking toward the door. "You cannot leave!" Kendros shouted. "The terraforming crisis requires immediate attention. Millions of Velthari lives depend on human intervention." Hyunwoo stopped walking. He turned around to face the council one last time. Every alien eye, crystal sensor, and gas tendril was focused on him. "For 30 years, we have served this council," he said. "We have given our best minds, our greatest efforts, and many of our lives to help the galaxy. We asked for only one thing in return: the right to be treated as equals." His voice never got louder, but somehow everyone in the huge hall could hear him clearly. "You have made your position very clear," he continued. "You see us as servants, not partners. We accept this decision. We also choose to accept the consequences of your decision." "What consequences?" Kexalar demanded, its crystal body flashing, angry red colors. "You will find out," Hyunwoo said simply. He turned and walked toward the massive doors that led out of the council chamber. His team followed him in complete silence. Their footsteps echoed in the huge space. Behind them, the aliens began to panic. They called out in their various languages, but without the human translation systems, most of their words were meaningless noise to each other. For the first time in decades, the Galactic Council could not understand itself. The great doors began to close as the last human left the chamber. Hyunwoo did not look back. His face showed no anger, no sadness, no regret. He had done what he came to do. The doors sealed shut with a soft hiss, leaving the most powerful beings in the galaxy alone with their decision. In the silence that followed, some of them began to realize what they had just lost. But it was too late to change anything now. The humans were gone. The news spread across Earth faster than wildfire. Every major city heard about what happened at the Galactic Council within hours. In Seoul, people gathered around public screens to watch the footage. In New York, traffic stopped as drivers listened to their radios. In London, workers left their offices early to go home and tell their families. The aliens had said no. After 30 years of faithful service, humanity had been rejected completely. President Da-Yun Cho sat in her office in New Geneva, watching the reports come in from around the world. She was 53 years old with short black hair and calm, eyes that missed nothing. She had been president for 6 years, and she had hoped this day would never come. Her assistant knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. "Madam President, the Emergency Council is ready for you." Da-Un nodded and stood up. She walked down the long hallway to the council chamber, where the most important people in Earth's government were waiting for her. These were the people who had to decide what humanity would do next. Won Ho-jung, the chief science advisor, was already pulling up data on the main screen. He was a thin man with thick glasses who knew more about galactic affairs than almost anyone on Earth. Next to him sat General Yu Jin Nam, the head of Earth's military forces. She was younger than most generals, but she had earned her position by being smarter and tougher than everyone else. "How many of our people are out there?" Da-Yun asked as she took her seat. "Over 200,000, Won Ho replied, adjusting his glasses. "Scientists, engineers, doctors, peacekeepers, traders, diplomats. They're spread across 47 different star systems. And they're all in danger now," General Nam added grimly. "The moment we officially break with the Council, our people become targets. Some alien species won't care about the difference between Earth's government and individual humans." Da-Un looked at the numbers on the screen. Each number represented real people with families back on Earth, people who had volunteered to leave their home world to serve the galaxy. "What about the projects they're working on?" she asked. Won Ho pulled up another screen full of data. 47 major crisis response operations currently active, 23 dead worlds being terraformed back to life, 156 ongoing peacekeeping missions, 31 medical research projects dealing with alien diseases that could wipe out entire species. The room was quiet as everyone looked at the numbers. These weren't just statistics. Each project represented millions or billions of alien lives that depended on human help. "If we pull our people out, what happens to all of that?" Da-Yun asked, though she already knew the answer. "Complete collapse within 6 months, Won Ho said quietly. "Maybe less. We designed most of these systems ourselves. Other species don't understand how they work. They can't maintain them without us." Finance Minister Jae-hyun Park spoke up from the far end of the table. "We should also consider the economic impact. 40% of Earth's income comes from our work with the Galactic Council. If we cut ties completely, we're looking at massive unemployment and economic depression. Money can be replaced," General Nam said firmly. "Our people's dignity cannot." Da-Yun stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over the city. New Geneva was beautiful at sunset, with its mix of old Earth architecture and new buildings, designed for the galactic age. In the distance, she could see the spaceport where ships landed every day carrying news from the stars. "Bring me Ambassador Kim," she said finally. 20 minutes later, Hyunwoo Kim walked into the room. He had flown back to Earth immediately after leaving the council chamber. His suit was wrinkled from the long journey, and he looked tired, but his eyes were still sharp. "You did the right thing," Da-Yun told him as soon as he sat down. "Did I?" Hyunwoo asked. "Thousands of our people are still out there. They're going to be caught in the middle of this. That's why we're going to bring them home," Da-Un said. "All of them." She turned back to the council. "I want recall orders sent to every human in galactic space. Scientists, engineers, peacekeepers, everyone. They have 72 hours to pack up and leave." "Madam President," Won Ho said carefully, "some of these projects cannot be abandoned safely. The atmospheric processors on Velthari colonies, for example. If we just turn them off, millions of aliens will die." "Then we'll shut them down properly," Da-Un replied. "We're not murderers, but we're also not slaves. If the Galactic Council wants our help, they can treat us as equals. If they want to treat us as servants, they can learn to solve their own problems." General Nam leaned forward. "What about the aliens who try to stop our people from leaving?" "Our people are to avoid Confrontation whenever possible, Daun said. But if any alien government tries to force our citizens to stay, we will consider that an act of war. The room was quiet again. Everyone understood what this meant. For the first time in human history, Earth was breaking away from galactic civilization. Completely. Send the orders, Daun said. 3 hours later, the recall messages went out to every human installation in the galaxy. The messages were simple and direct. Pack up and come home immediately. On the research station orbiting Proxima. Centauri, Dr. Minho Seo received his message while working late in his laboratory. He was one of Earth's best experts on alien diseases, and he had spent 15 years developing cures for illnesses that could kill entire species. His work had saved billions of lives. He looked at his research notes, then at the message from Earth. Without hesitation, he began deleting his files and packing his equipment. The aliens wanted to treat humans like servants? Fine. They could solve their own medical problems. On the planet Kepler 442b, engineer Eunji Nam was managing the terraforming of a dead world. Massive machines that she had designed were slowly turning the poisonous atmosphere into something that Velthari colonists could breathe. The project was almost finished after 8 years of work. When she got the recall order, she began shutting down the machines properly. She could have just walked away and let them break down, killing everyone on the planet. But that wasn't the human way. She made sure the systems would keep working for at least 6 months after she left. What happened after that was up to the aliens. In the disputed border zone between Nexari and Fentok space, Captain Dong-Hyun Yu commanded a fleet of human peacekeeping ships. For 10 years, his presence had prevented 2 powerful alien species from going to war. His ships patrolled the border, stopped fights before they started, and kept the peace through a combination of diplomacy and strength. When he received the recall order, he gathered his fleet and began the journey home. Behind him, Nexari and Fentok ships immediately began moving toward each other. The war that humans had prevented for a decade was about to begin again. All across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Humans were packing up decades of work and walking away from projects that kept alien civilizations alive. They did their jobs professionally until the very end, making sure that critical systems wouldn't fail immediately. But they also made it clear that humanity's time as the galaxy's unpaid problem solvers was over. The aliens began to panic almost immediately. Emergency messages flooded Earth's communication networks. Alien ambassadors demanded meetings. Some species offered money, others offered threats. A few even offered trade agreements and cultural exchanges. But Earth's response to all of them was the same: silence. President Da-Yun Cho addressed the world that evening. The speech was broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy and transmitted to alien governments as well. For 30 years we have given our best to the galaxy, she said, standing behind a simple podium in the presidential palace. We have ended wars, cured diseases, and brought dead worlds back to life. We have done this not for money or power, but because we believed it was the right thing to do. She paused and looked directly into the camera. We asked for only one thing, in return: the right to be treated as equals, the right to have a voice in decisions that affect all species, including humanity. Today, the Galactic Council made it clear that they will never grant us this basic respect. Her voice remained calm and steady, but there was steel underneath it. Therefore, Earth is withdrawing from all galactic affairs. We will no longer serve as the galaxy's unpaid workers. We will no longer solve problems for species that refuse to treat us as partners. The Galactic Council has made their choice. Now they must live with the consequences. The broadcast ended, and Earth went silent. No more messages to alien governments. No more offers of help. No more humans rushing to solve galactic crises. For the first time in 30 years, the galaxy would have to solve its own problems. The question was, could they do it without human help? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. 3 months had passed since the humans left. and the Galactic Council was learning what life was like without them. The first crisis hit exactly 97 days after humanity's withdrawal. It started as a small border dispute between the Nexari and the Fentok, the kind of problem that human peacekeepers had solved hundreds of times before. But this time, there were no humans to stop it. The trouble began when a Nexari mining ship accidentally drifted into Fentok space. The Nexari were crystal beings who lived on solid worlds, while the Fentok were gas clouds who lived in space itself. They had been enemies for thousands of years before humans arrived to keep the peace. Without human translators to help them talk, both sides misunderstood what the other was trying to say. The Fentok thought the mining ship was an invasion. The Nexari thought the Fentok were trying to steal their valuable crystals. Within hours, both fleets were shooting at each other. Prime Kexalar of the Nexari called an emergency council meeting. The crystalline being's body flashed angry red as it spoke to the other council members. "The Fentok have attacked our peaceful mining operation." Kexalar's voice sounded like breaking glass. "This is an act of war. We demand immediate action." But Velquin, the Fentok representative, flashed bright orange in response. In the Fentok language, orange meant, "You are lying." Unfortunately, without human translation systems working, most of the other council members didn't know what the color meant. "The gas breathers are clearly upset about something," Kendros said from his seat. The tall blue alien looked confused. "But I cannot understand their color language without the human translators." This was the council's first big problem. For 30 years, humans had made it possible for all the different species to understand each other. Human translation systems didn't just change words from one language to another. They also translated colors, smells, sounds, and even body movements that different species used to communicate. Without the humans, the council members could barely understand each other. Zurmek, the voice of the Zulkar collective, tried to help. The insect beings were good with technology. "Our hive mind can create new translation systems," Zurmek buzzed in their harmonic language. "Give us time to study the human designs." But when the Zulkar technicians tried to understand the human translation computers, they found a big problem. The human systems were incredibly complex. They didn't just translate words. They also understood context, emotion, cultural differences, and dozens of other things that made communication between species possible. The humans had built these systems over 30 years, adding new features and improvements as they learned more about each alien species. No other species in the galaxy understood how to make anything like them. While the Council struggled to talk to each other, the situation between the Nexari and Fentok got worse. Without human peacekeepers to separate them, both sides brought in more ships. The small border dispute was turning into a real war, but the translation problem was just the beginning. On 17 different worlds, the atmospheric processors that humans had built were starting to fail. The planet Velthari Prime was one of them. It was home to 60 million Velthari colonists who depended on human-built machines to keep their air breathable. The machines were incredibly complex, designed to balance dozens of different gases in exactly the right amounts. Chief Engineer Ral Quinn of the Velthari tried to understand how the machines worked. He had studied alien technology for his entire life, but the human designs were unlike anything he had ever seen. "These systems are insane," he told his team as they stood in front of a massive atmospheric processor. "Look at this." The humans connected the oxygen regulators to the carbon dioxide filters, which control the nitrogen balancers, which affect the trace gas mixers. Everything is connected to everything else. His assistant, a younger Velthari named Golden, studied the computer screens that showed how the machine was running. "The readings are getting worse every day. The oxygen levels are dropping slowly, but they are dropping." "Can we fix it?" Ralquin asked. Golden shook his head. "We don't even understand how it works. The humans didn't just build machines. They built entire ecosystems. Every part depends on every other part. If we change one thing wrong, the whole system could collapse. This was happening on worlds all across the galaxy. Human engineers hadn't built their systems to be difficult to understand on purpose. They had built them the way humans naturally thought about problems, as connected networks where everything worked together. But this meant that other species couldn't just replace one broken part. They had to understand the entire system, and that was almost impossible without the humans who had designed it. The economic problems were even worse. For decades, humans had been the galaxy's trade coordinators. They had built the computer networks that tracked goods moving between star systems. They had created the mathematical formulas that made faster-than-light shipping profitable. They had designed the logistics systems that moved food, medicine, and raw materials to where they were needed. Without the humans, galactic trade began to break down. Captain Holven of the Andronian Transport Guild tried to deliver a shipment of medical supplies to a Nexari colony. But when he arrived at the space station where he was supposed to drop off the goods, nobody knew what to do with them. "Where is the cargo manifest?" asked the station manager, a crystalline being named Tex Iron. "The humans always handled the paperwork," Holven replied. "I just fly the ship and deliver the goods." "But how do I know these are the right supplies? How do I know where they are supposed to go? How do I know who is supposed to pay for them?" Holven had no answers. The human trade networks had handled all of those details automatically. Without them, he was just a pilot with a ship full of goods that nobody knew how to process. All across the galaxy, similar problems were multiplying. Ships full of food arrived at hungry colonies, but nobody knew how to unload them properly. Medical supplies sat in warehouses while people died from diseases because the distribution systems were too complex for anyone but humans to operate. The Galactic Council tried to hire other species to replace the humans. They offered huge amounts of money to anyone who could fix the problems, but it didn't work. The Andronian technicians were smart, but they thought about problems differently than humans did. They tried to build simple, efficient systems, but the human designs weren't simple. They were elegant networks that balanced hundreds of different factors at once. The Cathari scientists were excellent researchers, but they wanted to study how things worked instead of just fixing them. They spent weeks analyzing human designs. Instead of keeping critical systems running, the robotic synthoids could maintain existing systems perfectly, but they couldn't adapt when something unexpected happened. When a solar flare damaged the atmospheric processors on Nouvelle Thari, the synthoid repair teams didn't know how to adjust the systems to compensate. They could only follow the original programming. By the end of the third month, council meetings had become disasters. The members could barely understand each other without human translators. The Nexari Fen-Tok War was spreading to nearby systems. Critical life support systems were failing on dozens of worlds. Trade networks were collapsing. Everywhere, Kendros finally did what no council member had wanted to do. He sent a message to Earth. The message was simple and direct. The Galactic Council requests immediate human assistance with critical infrastructure failures. We are prepared to discuss compensation. The message was sent on a Tuesday. By Thursday, there was still no response from Earth. On Friday, Kendros sent another message. Urgent, life support failures threatening millions of lives, requesting emergency human intervention. Still no response. On Monday, the Council sent a formal diplomatic request. The Galactic Council formally requests the immediate return of human technical personnel to prevent humanitarian catastrophe. Earth's silence continued. It was Kexalar, who finally said what everyone was thinking. They are not coming back, are they? The council chamber was quiet, except for the soft humming of the translation systems that barely worked anymore. Through the great windows, they could see the lights of ships in the distance. But many of those ships were carrying refugees from worlds where human-built systems had failed. "What do we do now?" Velquin asked, flashing a color that nobody else could understand. Nobody had an answer. On Earth, President Da-Yun Cho read the alien messages with the same calm expression she had worn for months. Her advisors watched her carefully, waiting for her decision. "Madam President," Wan Ho-jung said quietly, "the atmospheric failure on Nouvelle Thari is real. 60 million people will die if those processors shut down completely." Da-yun set the messages aside and looked out the window at the peaceful Earth sky. "Send them a single response," she said finally. "Tell them that Earth is willing to discuss limited humanitarian assistance in exchange for full Galactic Council membership with voting rights equal to our contribution." "And if they refuse?" General Nam asked. "Then they will learn what their pride actually costs," Da-yun replied. The message was sent that afternoon. By evening, there was still no response from the Galactic Council. The aliens were discovering that swallowing their pride was harder than they had expected. 8 months after the humans left, the galaxy was dying. It started with the Andromeda Plague. 15 years ago, this disease had almost wiped out 6 different species before human doctors found a way to stop it. The cure didn't kill the plague completely. Instead, it kept the disease sleeping, controlled by careful treatment and constant monitoring. Dr. Kyung-Soo Park had been the human scientist who created the treatment protocol. He had died 5 years ago, but his work had kept billions of aliens alive. The treatment centers he designed automatically made the medicine that kept the plague under control. Other human doctors had maintained his systems and trained alien medical staff to help, but when the humans left, they took their knowledge with them. Dr. Felmiran, a Cathari physician on the planet Zerion 7, watched her medical computers with growing fear. The automatic systems were still making the anti-plague medicine, but something was going wrong. The chemical mixture was changing slightly each day. "The protein synthesis is off by 3%, her assistant Golrin reported. "That doesn't sound like much, but it's getting worse." Felmiran studied the readouts. The human-designed system was incredibly complex. It didn't just make medicine, it also monitored how the plague was changing and adjusted the treatment to match. But without human doctors to guide it, the system was slowly losing its ability to keep up with the disease. "How long before the treatment stops working?" she asked. Golrin ran the calculations. "At this rate, maybe 2 months. And if the treatment fails?" They both knew the answer. The Andromeda Plague would wake up again. Zerion 7 had a population of 800 million. Without the human treatment, 90% of them would die within a year. Felmiran sent urgent messages to other medical centers in the galaxy. The responses she got back were all the same. The anti-plague systems were failing everywhere. Dozens of worlds were facing the same slow countdown to disaster. The medical crisis was bad, but it wasn't the worst problem facing the galaxy. On Kepler 442b, the terraforming project that engineer Eun-ji Nam had spent 8 years building was collapsing. The human engineer had shut down the atmospheric processors properly when she left, programming them to keep working for months after her departure. But she had always planned to come back and maintain them. Now, with no humans to fix problems, the delicate balance was falling apart. Colony Administrator Keltaran watched the atmospheric readings with despair. The oxygen levels were dropping every day. The carbon dioxide was building up. Worst of all, toxic gases that the processors were supposed to filter out were starting to leak into the air. "How many people can we evacuate?" he asked his staff. "Maybe 10 million, his logistics coordinator replied. "But we have 60 million colonists here, and where would we send them? Half the other Velthari colonies are having similar problems." The colony had been a miracle of human engineering. A dead, poisonous world had been transformed into a garden where 60 million Velthari could live and work. But without humans to maintain it, the miracle was turning back into a nightmare. The economic situation was even worse than the medical and environmental disasters. Without human trade networks, the galaxy's economy was collapsing. Captain Taemin, of the human merchant ship Soul's Pride, watched from outside galactic space as trade routes died. His ship was full of rare metals that dozens of worlds desperately needed, but Earth's embargo meant he couldn't sell them to anyone in the galaxy. Aliens had tried to replace the human trade systems, but it was hopeless. Human mathematics had made faster-than-light commerce possible by solving problems that other species couldn't even understand. For example, shipping goods between star systems required calculating how space-time distortion would affect the cargo during faster-than-light travel. Humans had developed formulas that could predict these effects perfectly. Without these calculations, alien merchants were losing entire shipments to temporal displacement and gravitational shear. The Andronian Merchant Guild had lost 3 ships in the past month alone. The vessels had arrived at their destinations, but their cargo had aged 50 years during the journey. Food had rotted, medicines had expired, and electronics had broken down. "We need the human mathematics," Guild leader Holvren admitted to his council. "Our best scientists have been working for months, and they still don't understand how the humans made it work." But the humans weren't sharing their knowledge anymore. The military situation was worst of all. The war between the Nexari and Fentok had spread to 4 star systems. Without human peacekeepers to stop them, both sides were fighting with increasing desperation. Fleet Admiral Hexalar of the Nexari surveyed the damage to his crystalline warships after the latest battle. The Fentok gas ships had attacked with a new kind of weapon that corroded crystal hulls. 3 of his best vessels were barely functional. "What are our losses?" he asked his aide. 17 ships destroyed, 43 damaged. The Fentok lost about the same number. "And what have we gained?" His aide was quiet for a moment. "Nothing, sir. The disputed systems are still disputed. But now they're also full of wreckage and radiation. For 15 years, human peacekeepers had prevented this war through a combination of diplomacy and strength. Captain Dong-Hyun Yu's fleet had been small, but it had been in exactly the right places at exactly the right times to stop conflicts before they started. Without the humans, both sides were learning that war was much more expensive than peace. Galactic Council was in chaos. Their emergency meetings were disasters of miscommunication and confusion. Without human translation systems, the council members could barely understand each other. During one particularly terrible session, Kendros tried to propose a joint mission to fix the failing atmospheric processors, but the Fentok representative thought he was declaring war on gas-breathing species. The Nexari Prime believed he was offering to sell Velthari territory to the highest bidder. The Zulkar Collective interpreted his words as a threat to destroy all hive-mind species. By the end of the meeting, 3 different species were threatening to leave the council. 2 others were demanding military action, and nobody understood what anyone else actually wanted. "This is madness," Kendros said to his staff after the meeting ended. "We cannot govern a galaxy if we cannot even talk to each other." "Maybe we should accept the human terms," suggested his aide, Golvren. "Full membership in exchange for their help." Kendros was quiet for a long time. The idea of treating humans as equals still felt wrong to him. His species had ruled star systems when humans were still living in caves. The Velthari had built great cities among the stars when Earth was still a primitive world. But now those great cities were dying because the Velthari couldn't maintain the machines that humans had built. "The other council members will never agree," he said finally. "They would rather see the galaxy burn than admit that humans are our equals." He was wrong. Desperation was making the other species reconsider their pride. Prime Kexala received a report that the Nexari homeworld's main atmospheric processor was showing signs of stress. The massive machine that kept their crystal cities livable had been built by humans 20 years ago. Now it was developing cracks that the Nexari engineers couldn't fix. "How long before it fails completely?" Kexalar asked. "Unknown," the chief engineer replied. "Maybe years, maybe months. The human design is too complex for us to predict." If the homeworld's atmospheric processor failed, 40 billion Nexari would die. Even Zurmek of the Zulkar Collective was beginning to worry. The hive mind species was the most self-sufficient in the galaxy, but they still depended on trade with other species for certain resources. As trade networks collapsed, the collective was struggling to get the materials they needed for their expanding population. Calculate the probability of galactic civilization surviving without human assistance. Zurmek ordered their best statistical drones. The answer came back within hours. Less than 5% chance of maintaining current civilization levels, near certainty of massive population decline and technological regression within 2 years. Even the proud Zulkar couldn't ignore mathematics. By the end of the 8th month, the Council was receiving hundreds of desperate messages every day. Colony administrators begged for help with failing life support systems. Military commanders requested assistance with supply line collapses. Medical centers pleaded for aid with equipment that nobody understood how to fix. Every message had the same answer: we need the humans back. But Earth remained silent. President Da-Yun Cho read the reports from her intelligence services with a heavy heart. She took no pleasure in watching alien civilizations struggle. Every life lost to the cascade failures was a tragedy. But she also knew that humanity's future depended on being treated with respect. The Velthari are officially requesting emergency negotiations, Foreign Minister In-Soo Yang reported. They're offering significant territorial concessions and exclusive trading rights. The Nexari are promising us first access to their crystal technology, added Defense Minister Song Min Lee. They've never offered that to anyone before. The Fentok want to create a formal alliance, Wonho Jung added. Full military and economic partnership. Da-Un considered all the offers. Each one was more generous than anything the aliens had ever proposed before. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was barely recognizable. The great research station orbiting Sigma Draconis, once a symbol of galactic cooperation, was now a tomb. Half its sections were sealed off due to life support failures. The other half housed desperate scientists from different species, trying to work together without the human systems that had once made cooperation possible. Dr. Bethnar, a Nexari crystalline being, worked frantically alongside Velquin Secondary, a Fentok gas cloud contained in a mobile tank. They were an unlikely pair. Their species had been at war for 2 years now, but here in the abandoned station, old. Hatred seemed less important than survival. The plague mutation is accelerating, Bethnar said, her crystal body flickering with stress patterns. The Andromedy strain has changed so much that the old human treatments are completely useless. Velquin Secondary flashed pale blue, the color of deep worry in Fentok communication. Our medical facilities on 3 gas giant colonies have reported total treatment failure. We lost 60 million souls last month alone. Bethnar turned to the computer terminal that held decades of human medical research. The files were still there, but they might as well have been written in an alien language. Even after 2 years of study, no one could understand how the human doctors had made their miracle cures work. The encryption is beyond anything we understand, Bethnar admitted. The humans didn't just write down their formulas. They embedded them in mathematical frameworks that require human thinking to decode. It was the same story everywhere. Human knowledge remained locked away, useless to species that had rejected humanity's partnership. On Earth, life had continued with quiet dignity. The planet had turned inward, focusing on its own development and growth. Cities had become cleaner and more beautiful. Technology had advanced in new directions. Art and culture had flourished as humanity rediscovered what it meant to be human without constantly serving alien masters. President Da-Yun Cho was now in her final year in office. At 59, her hair had turned completely gray, but her eyes remained as sharp as ever. She stood in the observation deck of the orbital defense station above Earth, watching the stars with Admiral Jae Sung Lim. "The reports are getting worse every day," the admiral said quietly. The Velthari homeworld lost another atmospheric processor last week. That's 3 major colonies completely evacuated in the past 6 months. Da-Yun nodded. She had read all the intelligence reports. The galaxy was in free fall. Billions of aliens had died from diseases that human doctors could have cured. Entire worlds had been abandoned when human-built life support systems failed. Wars raged across star systems that human peacekeepers had kept calm for decades. "Any word from the Council?" she asked. "Nothing official, but our intelligence sources say they're in complete chaos." The latest session ended when the Nexari and Fentok representatives started shooting at each other in the Council chamber itself. Da-Yun wasn't surprised. Without human translation systems, the Galactic Council had become a Tower of Babel where no one could understand anyone else. "There is something else," Admiral Lim continued. "We've been receiving unofficial communications, personal messages from individual alien leaders." He handed her a data pad with dozens of message summaries. Da-Un read through them with growing interest. The messages were desperate pleas from alien officials who had run out of options. A Nexari colony administrator begged for help saving his crystal gardens from toxic contamination. A Velthari medical chief offered to share her life's work in exchange for a single human doctor. A Fentok military commander promised territory and resources if humans would just help him stop the war that was destroying his people. But the most interesting message came from Kendros himself. "The Velthari ambassador wants to meet," Da-Un said after reading his personal note. "Privately. No council involvement." "Could be a trap," Admiral Lim warned. "Could be," Da-Un agreed. "But I don't think so. Desperation makes people honest." 3 days later, a small Velthari ship requested permission to enter Earth's solar system. It carried only Kendros and a minimal crew. No weapons, no escorts, no diplomatic protocol. Just a former ambassador coming to beg. The meeting took place in the same room where Da-Yun had first decided to withdraw from galactic affairs. Kendros looked very different from the proud alien who had rejected humanity 2 years ago. His blue skin was pale, his 4 arms moved with nervous energy, and his starlight robes were wrinkled and dim. "Madam President," he said as he entered the room, "thank you for agreeing to see me." Da-Yun gestured to a chair designed for his alien physiology. "You've come a long way to talk. I'm listening." Kendros sat down slowly, his movements showing exhaustion and defeat. "My people are dying," he said simply. "Not just the Velthari. All of us. The Nexari, the Fentok, the Zulkar, even my own species. The galaxy is falling apart." "I'm sorry to hear that," Da-Un replied, and she meant it. "But I fail to see how this is Earth's problem." "Because you could stop it," Kendros said urgently. "With human help, we could fix the atmospheric processors, cure the diseases, restore the trade networks. We could end the wars and rebuild civilization. We offered to help 2 years ago," Da-Un reminded him. "Your council made it very clear that our help wasn't worth treating us as equals." Kendros was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "We were wrong." The words seemed to cause him physical pain. Da-Un could see why. For a species as proud as the Velthari, admitting error was almost impossible. "We thought humans were useful servants," he continued. "We believed that you were lucky primitives who had stumbled onto some clever tricks. We never understood that you were actually superior to us in the ways that matter most." "And what ways are those?" Da-Un asked. "Problem-solving, cooperation, building systems that work together instead of competing, making peace instead of making war." Kendros looked directly at her with all 4 of his eyes. "You didn't just help us survive. You taught us how to be better than we were. And we threw that gift away because our pride was more important to us than wisdom." Dae-yun considered his words carefully. What exactly are you proposing? Full council membership, Kendros said immediately. Voting rights equal to your contribution to galactic civilization. Formal recognition of Earth as a sovereign power. A seat on the ruling committee. Everything you asked for and more. And the other council members agree to this? Kendros hesitated. Not yet. But they will. They have to. The alternative is watching their civilizations die. Dae-yun stood and walked to the window that looked out over Earth's peaceful continents. You know, Ambassador, 2 years ago I would have accepted that offer immediately. But a lot has happened since then. What do you mean? We've learned something important about ourselves. We've discovered that we don't need the galaxy as much as we thought we did. Earth is prospering. Our people are happy. Our technology is advancing in new directions. We found that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Kendros felt a chill of fear. Are you saying that humans will never return to galactic civilization? I'm saying that we've learned to value ourselves properly, Dae-yun replied. 2 years ago, we were so eager to be accepted that we would have done anything for a seat at your table. Now we understand that we don't need your approval to be worthy. She turned back to face him. But that doesn't mean we're completely closed to cooperation. Under the right conditions, humanity might be willing to help the galaxy rebuild. What conditions? Kendros asked quickly. First, formal membership in the Galactic Council with full voting rights, not as a reward for service, but as recognition of our inherent worth as a species. Agreed. Second, a complete restructuring of the Council to prevent any species from being treated as servant races in the future. Every species gets representation proportional to their contribution to galactic civilization. That will be difficult, but possible. Third, a formal treaty recognizing Earth's sovereignty and humanity's right to refuse Council directives that conflict with our values. Kendros nodded eagerly. Yes, all of that can be arranged. And finally, Dae-yun said, her voice becoming steel, a formal apology from every member of the Council. Not just for rejecting our membership, but for treating us as inferiors when we were actually the ones keeping galactic civilization functional. Kendros was quiet for a long time. An apology would be almost impossible for the proud alien species to give. But as he thought about the dying colonies, the spreading plagues, and the wars that were consuming whole star systems, he realized he had no choice. I will make it happen, he said finally. Dae-yun smiled for the first time in the meeting. Then, we can begin negotiations. But understand this, Ambassador. We negotiate as equals or we don't negotiate at all. The age of humans begging for acceptance is over. 6 months later, the Galactic Council convened for the most important session in its history. The Great Hall had been rebuilt with new translation systems based on human designs. Representatives from every major species were present, including the humans. Hyun-woo Kim stood once again at the central podium, but this time his chair was among the council members, not in front of them.